Hi, and welcome into episode number 1 of Still a Hero, a weekly podcast where we spotlight an individual who served in the military and then returned back home to serve in their community. My name is Randy Miller. Hey, Chris Ford from USAA is joining us today. He's a corporate impact principal leading Face the Fight, which I cannot wait to tell you about. And in this role, he guides strategic planning, fundraising, operational oversight, and external relations to ensure Face the Fight's long-term sustainability and impact. Joined USAA in 2024, 20-year Air Force combat-tested veteran, and he's here with us on Still a Hero. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing well, Randy. Thank you so much for having me today.
Hey, it's great to meet you, man. Thank you so much for your service. And the first question I always love to ask, because we always get some great answers, what prompted you to join the military?
That's a great question. I raised my hand to serve, I think, mostly because of influences from male role models in my life. My parents divorced when I was young, raised by a single mom. But my lacrosse coach and my neighbor were both majors in the Army Reserve, and they were really big influences in my life and role models of what serving our country looks like. It didn't hurt that the Niagara Falls Air Base air show flew over my house every summer when they showed up in town, so I was really enamored by the Thunderbirds and all that they did. So, I felt it was a pathway for me to do something bigger than myself.
There was just a gigantic air show in Miami, Florida, and I was talking to the organizers, and they said that's one of the biggest reasons they do the air show, and one of the biggest impacts are these kids that come through, and they get to see the equipment and the planes and meet the pilots, and a lot of them end up serving. So I
Absolutely.
see exactly what you're talking about. Talk about your military career a little bit. 20 years, huh?
Yeah, it was great. It was such an honor to wear the uniform for 20 years. I was lucky to leave high school and go to the United States Air Force Academy and straight into service as a commissioned second lieutenant. I was a security forces officer for most of those years. I had opportunities to do many other things. I was a legislative liaison. I was a contingency war planner. A lot of outsized experiences for my young career, which were just really formative for me. It was great. We served all over the country. We moved about every other year for about 20 years, dragging my family along. But it was a great experience, and I had the opportunity to go to 3 combat zones and deployments during my time as well. So
wow.
No regrets. I would do it again if I was younger. It was really an amazing experience for us.
And Bronze Star recipient, and I mean, just a special life of service. So thank you so much. What was your transition like when you got out?
Well, it was better than most, I would say, but not awesome. I think I had someone recently remind me that the military transition experience, the burden of that experience is put on the shoulders of the transitioning veteran, who is the least qualified person to navigate their own transition. So that resonated with me. Again, I went straight into the Air Force out of high school to the Air Force Academy and served for 20 years. I didn't do adulting until I was like 42.
Right.
I had never done a resume, an interview, any of those things. So it wasn't smooth for sure. I was fortunate that I was at the Pentagon when I retired. And we made an intentional decision to retire. I was right at 20 years. I was selected to go to Army War College. I was likely getting promoted to full colonel. But we said, I think we've done enough. Like another 6 years of paying back all those service obligations was probably more than we wanted to continue. And at that time, my last tour, I was doing community integration for the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So I was really getting my first insights into what civil society looked like and how those communities were supporting veterans and their families as they transitioned back into society. And it was really fascinating to me. So we made the decision that I wanted to get out and continue to serve, no longer in uniform or as a civilian GS employee, if you will, within the Department of Defense, but do something more in the community. And so my first role out of uniform, I went to a major notable nonprofit to serve as a legislative director because of my prior legislative experience. And I was fired in my first 5 months. I
Is
was
that what
shocked.
I have heard that story so many times.
Yeah, it was shocking to me. It was eye-opening to realize that, hey, Toto, we're not in Kansas anymore.
Right.
It was, mission aligned, but the culture was different, and I didn't understand the nuances of private business culture compared to the military uniform. I had spent 20 years with a very strong reputation of credibility, of challenging peers and advising seniors to think differently. And my advice was well received. In this new setting, it wasn't as welcomed. So I found myself looking for a job pretty quickly. Thankfully, because of my last role on the joint staff, work doing community integration, I had already built a business plan for a national association supporting the veteran and military nonprofit community. At the time, there were 48,000 nonprofits focused on this community, but there was no trade association for those doing the good work to help them find best practices and find resources and upskill. So when I was let go from that position, that became my full-time job, was to take that business plan off the shelf and make it into a real thing. And I did that. So by the end of my first year out of uniform, we had launched this national association serving the community. And boy, I learned a lot through that exercise,
Yeah.
having never started or led a business before. But we were successful. We did that for about 4 years and scaled that up. And it was eventually acquired by another nonprofit to sustain. And then I transitioned over to be the CEO of another nonprofit called Stop Soldier Suicide.
Wow.
So it was a little tumultuous for a minute there, but all in all, very fortunate to have the experiences we had.
That's yeah, we're talking to Chris Ford here on Still a Hero. And that story, Chris, resonates with me. I've heard so many of those kind of stories from veterans. I was mentoring this 20-year Navy vet, and she got her first job. Took a while, but she finally got her first job. And she calls me about 3 months in, and she said, "This is just not. This is not working." And I said, "What's not working?" And she said, "In the military, when I tell somebody to do something, they do it." And she said, "You tell people here to do something, it may never get done." And it was just, kind of what you're talking about, that culture shock and trying to adapt to the private sector. So, I love what Mike Rowe says. There's a boot camp for going into the military, no boot camp for coming out, right?
For sure, for sure. It is different, for sure. But, I've been fortunate that every role that I've had in uniform and since has been aligned to serving in one way or another. And I really feel like my calling is to live a life of service, whether that's wearing the uniform or not. And I've been really fortunate that for me and my family, my vocation has aligned with purpose. And that's not always the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you wear the uniform, you get a paycheck to serve your country, and that your purpose is fulfilled from the person that's paying you at the same time. I would imagine for many others that that's not their experience when they take the uniform off, that they go into corporate America, building widgets, selling widgets, whatever it may be, and they're feeling a little disillusioned that, like, that doesn't feel purposeful or
Mm-hmm.
meaningful. And so
Right.
what I've been coaching other veterans to consider is that you may have to find your purpose outside of your work now, and go volunteer in the Little League or the PTA or in your community or whatever your jam is. Go figure that out and fill that part of your cup through that community service, while also providing for your family through a vacation. And maybe you'll be fortunate that those two things will align again, but it's not always the case.
Yeah, it's amazing to me how many veterans do that and feel that need is to serve a purpose and find a new mission like you have, Chris. Let's talk about Face the Fight. I mean, this organization and this initiative is such a gigantic effort by USAA. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's really exciting to be a part of, to be candid. As I mentioned, I went to Stop Soldier Suicide to fill a leadership gap and be the CEO there in 2019. And we were a small organization, mostly doing referral services for those experiencing near crisis, not acute crisis, but near crisis. But we reimagined that service and that organization and scaled it into one of the nation's largest nonprofits providing telemedicine, clinical, evidence-informed interventions for at-risk veterans. And it was during that time that I connected with USAA, who was one of our funders. And USAA was exploring the idea of doing something more intentional around suicide prevention. It was the number one issue for the last decade for our members and for our teammates. And they felt it was time to lean into this issue more directly, having no expertise in suicide prevention, obviously. But the intentionality there was really important. And they spent about a year and a half learning from field experience and building a scientific advisory board of how and where they might influence this problem with veteran suicide. So as a CEO at Stop Slaughter Suicide, I was able to offer weekly our field perspective to the team at USA that was conceptualizing and building Face the Fight. Fast forward the tape, in June of 2023, it was launched as a national movement and initiative with our partners at Humana Foundation and Reach Resilience. And as co-founders, launched this movement to really start moving the needle on this problem. And it's been amazing since. And now to be entrusted as the executive overseeing the work is like a full circle moment for me and my family to be leading this important work. And you know, the reality is this problem is very persistent in our community.
Right.
More than 6,400 veterans die by their own hand every year. That number's been very persistent year over year since about 2006. The rates are going up. The numbers are relatively flat, but we think there's something that we can do here as a convener, as a funder, with really intentional focus to start to curb this unfortunate trend in our society.
Well, and Chris, you know, you talked about different initiatives and methods, and we've talked to so many organizations that have such great intentions and are leading by example and really trying to get out there and try different kinds of methods to reach these at-risk veterans. And you guys, you kind of come alongside a lot of these groups, right? And you've established a goal for Face the Fight.
We have. We hope that by 2032, we will save 15,000 lives. Now, it's really hard to do that. As you can imagine, it's hard to prove a negative, a life saved. You have anecdotal information, of course, where someone's like, oh my gosh, your service saved my life. And those are important pieces of evidence, but we really want to hold ourselves accountable to knowing that the investments and the work we're doing are really moving the needle here. So what we've done specifically is we've aligned our strategies with CDC pillars to ensure that we're using evidence-informed decision-making in where we invest our time and resources. We have a relatively small budget compared to the budget at the VA, for example. But so we want to be really in tune to making sure that those investments are really attributed to measurable outcomes. So our strategies focus on evidence-informed practices, so clinical care, screening, peer connectedness. Lethal means safety is another area we're really focused on. Firearms safety during moments of crisis are really important. So as a business you would expect that we would be very disciplined in how we invest our time and monies, as any business would, even though it's a community impact, social impact cause. We're still applying the same rigor here to make sure that we don't get distracted by shiny objects that really aren't proven effectual in this problem set, because it is complex. One thing we know for sure is that there is no straight pathway to suicidal ideation and behaviors. There could be a variety, hundreds of reasons that people consider these as their only pathway to healing or relief. But one thing we know in our community for sure is how veterans die by suicide. And in our community, about 70% of them use firearms. So that's a keen area of us to focus, is to limit access to those very lethal means during moments of crisis to ensure safe storage that could be either in the home or out of the home. and a lot of education to loved ones and veterans themselves to say, hey, now may not be the right time for you to have all these weapons accessible in the home. Let's set these aside somewhere else, right? So that we can put more time and distance between impulsive thinking, if you will, and let
Hmm.
people reset their emotions and their behaviors to be a little safer. So it's a multi-pronged effort. We also have a coalition of more than 300 organizations that have joined our movement. These are corporations, philanthropic investors, nonprofits, government agencies. And for us, they're an amplifying effect that allows us to reach further into American society, to have more eyes and ears at the front line of this fight.
So, Chris, how important is that? That conversation, that dialogue, and has the stigma of seeking help from veterans, has that lessened?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Randy. The conversation is really important. I think the more people that have the courage to look at people they love and say, hey, are you okay today?
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to get that off of a text. You're not going to get that off of social media
Right.
posts. You're probably not going to even get that on an email or other types of communications. But when you see people eye to eye every day, you can tell something
Mm-hmm.
may not be going well for them. And we know that crises don't show up in the clinical setting first. They show up around the dinner table, the
Yeah.
workplace, the community. So I think everyone has a role to play in being on the front line, eyes and ears, looking at people they know and love, and just asking, are you okay? And listening. And if they're not, it's you don't have to be the clinician that saves them. You just
Right.
have to refer them to competent care and say, hey, let's get you connected with somebody who can help.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's really important. To the stigma question, it is a tough area for veterans in particular. We are trained to not raise our hand and ask for help and show weakness while serving. And it's hard to shed that off after 3 or 30 years of service, to
Mm-hmm.
change your mindset to be open to saying, I'm not okay. I think if COVID helped with one thing, it actually helped in that area, that a lot more people were willing to say now, hey, I don't think I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
I think the mental health conversation is more at the forefront in the workplace, in community, in our society as a result of the burden that people went through during the pandemic. I think we have a long way to go to continue to reinforce that narrative and tell people that you don't have to fight this struggle alone. We can do this together. We can walk alongside you. I'm here for you. And give people a pathway to admit that they're not okay and they might need some help.
I just had coffee with a young veteran. I think he's 45. A couple of days ago, undiagnosed PTSD, 3 failed suicide attempts, and he was telling me his story. And he has, luckily, uh, thank God, he has overcome and is actually running for Congress. So that was just a great story to hear. And I would assume, Chris, when you hear those kind of stories, man, it just makes you so proud of the work that you and USAA are doing.
Absolutely. Let's be clear that for a vast majority of those men and women who've served our nation, they are doing well back in community, in society.
Sure.
95% of those who take the uniform off have a smooth-ish transition, land on both feet, and they move on with their lives doing incredible things in other ways. But you're right, there is still too many of us who are struggling, and it takes some time to find their pathway to success and thriving again. And that's really the goal of Face the Fight, is that we are hopeful that our investments, our partnerships, our work will not just help veterans survive, but help them thrive again. And I remember years ago, I was actually offended by the comment, but a good friend of mine had said that his mission was to ensure that veterans' military service wasn't the greatest thing they did in their lives, that after service, they found something even more impactful. And I was just coming out of uniform. I'm like, there's no way. There is no way that's possible. But I get his point in
Yeah.
saying that military service can be incredibly rewarding and fulfilling and purposeful. I know it was for us. It was an honor. But what else could you do in society after that could be even better? And how do you build a pathway to those types of goals and aspirations, which I think is what we all want, right? We don't have to
Right.
be CEOs or politicians or heads of state kind of things, but we could do something really meaningful in our neighborhood with our families, in our communities. And that could be really purposeful and be fulfilling for the rest of our lives. And it's helping people navigate that transition, kind of the lost identity piece that they have while serving, and help them find a new identity. I think what's super interesting is when people talk about their identity, like I'll go through mine, right? I am a son, a father, a husband. I'm now a grandfather, but I'm a veteran. You can go through to the whole list. The only one that I just said that talks about who I was, not who I am, is veteran. So it's interesting that it's the only identity that talks about what I used to do, not who I am today. But it's one that we really hold tight.
Yeah.
And that's a weird construct for many people to understand. But I think recognizing that, saying, I'm proud of my service. I have all these things on my wall that reflect those service attributes and highlights, but that's not my total identity.
Right. Right.
There's more to it than that.
But Chris, I think the other reason that veterans hang on to that is because a lot of people can't claim that. That's still less than 1%. So it's so vital. And you said something very interesting about helping in your community, because I think people sometimes are under the impression that they have to do something on a grand scale, right, to make an impact or make a difference. I've told people that are looking to serve in some way to get out in their neighborhood and try to make something 1% better today. And if you do that, all of a sudden you find out you've made a lot of things better, and you made yourself better, right?
For sure, absolutely. And I think that's, that really resonates with obviously the mission at USAA, the team at USAA, the value we're providing our members. 14 million members at USAA. We wake up every day at this team trying to figure out how do we make their lives easier, better, smoother. So proud to be working here. I don't know how I snuck in the door at USAA, but I feel like it's such an honor to be working here, especially as you may have recently seen in November when we publicly announced our new initiative, Honor Through Action, a $500 million commitment to the military community, focusing on meaningful careers, financial security, and overall well-being. And Face the Fight fits into the well-being component of that on the suicide intervention space. But what's so exciting about working for a service-oriented company like USAA is that we're thinking much bigger and more broadly about the needs of the military community, not just our members, like the entire community. And what I love about Honor Through Action is it allows us to look at opportunities way left of crisis and saying, if we can help people with meaningful careers and financial security, those are risk factors that could lead to eventual suicidal thoughts and behaviors.
Absolutely.
So let's get way left of the crisis and start to tone down those risks and concerns so they never need Face the Fight. Right? That would be the ideal state.
Yeah.
So super proud to work in an association that is so committed as a corporate citizen to doing great things for our country.
Well, and I'm sure you have found out, Chris, as I have working with USAA, they don't do anything halfway.
You're right. You're right. When I'll never forget, I got to meet Wayne Peacock, the former CEO, as they were designing Face the Fight. It was in Charlotte, and we were at an event, and I was still at Stop Soldier Suicide, and he walked up to me, and he didn't start with like casual greetings. Hey, nice to he said to me, why USAA? And what he was asking is, why should USAA take on this massive problem where hundreds of millions of dollars of government dollars have been put against? Why should we lean into this issue? Not because he didn't think it was the right thing to do, but to your point, USA doesn't take on things it can't succeed at and fight hard to win at. And I stepped back and I just said, sir, I don't think there's any other company in this country that can or should take on this issue in a way that USAA can and should.
Good answer.
Yeah, it may have influenced the final decision to do it. I'll never know. I'll have to go back to Wayne and ask. But you're right. These issues are too important for those who've served and sacrificed so much for our country that we feel it's our obligation every day to wake up and think about how do we make their lives better.
Chris, what's the best way for people to find out more about Face the Fight?
Absolutely. It's very easy. You can go to wefacethefight.org and you can see all the great things that we're doing there. You can find ways to plug into training. Again, I think every American has an opportunity and maybe even an obligation to be the front line, eyes and ears, looking out for neighbors, friends, and loved ones to see if they're okay. And if not, connect them to resources. You can find a lot of those resources on wefacethefight.org. And I think you can also lean into the cause, get trained, get smarter, look out for your neighbors, right? Take active steps, spread the word. We're on social media, obviously. Spread the word. Let others know about the importance of this movement because we cannot do it alone. That's why we've built a coalition of more than 300 organizations. And I would invite every American to be part of that fight and help us really create a new future. And honestly, while we're focused on veteran suicide as our primary focus, I think what we're doing here could inform a broader strategy. And I'd love to see a day where we aspire to remove suicide as a normative condition in the human experience across our planet. So we would invite everybody to be involved.
Well, thank you so much for the information. Thank you for the time. And Chris Ford, you are still a hero. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy.